I'm back again with another video. I know last week I did a small compilation of all of my ASMR videos that were on Instagram and YouTube. I just thought it'd be fun and nice to have them all in one place that you can look at instead of scrolling through shorts. So today I'm going to be talking about the places I visited while I was in Italy. As I mentioned before, I had been traveling and I was in Florida and South Carolina, which is my other previous video besides the compilation video, where I discussed museums I visited while I was in those two states. So now we're going to look into Italy, where I was for about a month and a half, where I visited a lot of cities, historical sites, archaeological sites, and museums around Italy. Of course, I was there for a certification program, an educational program, so most of the days I was in a classroom learning about provenance research, antiquities trafficking, and art crime. So let's dive right in. First, I was able to visit the archaeological museum that is located in Emilia, Italy. Emilia, Italy is a very small town in Italy that is about, I would say, an hour and a half to 2 hours from Rome, depending on traffic, and is at the very tip top of a hill. It's a really cool little town, and it has a lot of historical sites to see. But the main area that I focused on was the town itself and the archaeological museum, as this is where we had class most of the time. The town itself has a lot of Roman ties, obviously, and there's even a store where right outside there is a glass floor and you can see into the necropolis that is underneath the store, which is honestly really crazy that you can go get gelato and then go look at the necropolis that was left by the Romans. And of course they have the archaeological museum. I wasn't able to go through the whole museum as, again, I was taking a class, but it is really cool. It's kind of inside of a little villa and it has a lot of different art, artifacts, objects, coins, vases, little statues, sculptures. There are so many things in this museum. Of course, while I was in Italy, I also went down to Naples. While I was in Naples, I went to the National Archaeological Museum, which of course houses most of the frescoes, mosaics, and artifacts from Pompeii and Herculaneum, which I did not know when I went, as I thought a lot of the objects would be in storage or in Pompeii, but it houses a majority of the frescoes within this museum. The museum is huge and it has so many different statues, sculptures, frescoes, mosaics. One of the most amazing things that I saw was a giant statue of Zeus, and he was probably almost as big as the room that I'm sitting in right now, if not bigger. They also have a cafe in this museum that was actually really cool, as they recreated the recipe that they found for bread that was in Pompeii, so you can eat it. It was really good. Not only this, but they do have temporary exhibitions, and during this time it was all about sirens, which I love sirens. I love reading about mermaids, sirens, and of course, as we know, in Greek mythology, sirens were not sirens as we would think of them in Pirates of the Caribbean or mermaids. They were, in fact, the body of a chicken or bird and the head of a woman. And having just seen the Odyssey, I will say that they are not depicted like this in the movie. They are depicted as normal sirens or mermaids that you would see in a pirate movie, or again, Little Mermaid. But it was a really cool exhibition. It had a lot of vases that depicted sirens and a lot of funerary objects also that depicted sirens, which I wasn't aware of. And it kind of went through the history starting from ancient Greece, ancient Rome, all the way up to Renaissance medieval time. So I thought it was a really cool exhibition to see, and it's really nice when you go to a museum and you see a traveling exhibition, as you know that it won't be there for very long and that it's also been other places and not a lot of people have seen it before. While I was in Naples, we did of course visit the archaeological sites of Herculaneum and Pompeii. I have been to Pompeii previously when I was younger, but I don't remember it that well, and it was really nice to go back again and to get more of a feel and more of a deeper dive into the history on a tour, as well as having studied a lot of mythology, history, and the destruction of Pompeii. But first, I'm going to start with Herculaneum. I had never been to Herculaneum before, and honestly, it is proven, and it is one of the most well-preserved sites over Pompeii and Herculaneum of the two. It is the best preserved. It has 2-story buildings. Herculaneum also has its own little museum that's just above the site, so you can go in there, and it has some excavated items such as jewelry, which is incredible that survives for so long, glass, little beads, they have vases, they have different sculptures, bronze sculptures, which is crazy, and it's really cool. And it's just overall a really cool little museum. There are tons of cats walking around the ruins as well, which is really cool, and most of the pictures that I took were of the cats that were sitting and lounging around in front of the museum and in the ruins of Herculaneum. So to get to Herculaneum, you actually have to go down into the archaeological site, as of course it was buried by lava and ash and magma and volcanic rock. Once you're down there, it is absolutely amazing. It's breathtaking. There's no way really to put this into words or to describe it to you, and all I have to say is you should definitely, if you have the chance, go visit for yourself. I really enjoyed walking around this city, and I know it's hard to say that you enjoyed something that brought so much destruction and death to a lot of the population, but it really is a peaceful, serene kind of area. They have pomegranate trees where you can sit and read. They offer free poetry books, free library books that you can sit and read in the garden and just kind of take it all in. They, of course, have a lot of mosaics and frescoes in this archaeological site. One of them was of Hercules, and they also had one that was a mosaic and a fresco of a deer, which was amazing. It's crazy how well preserved these were and how they've lasted for thousands of years. However, in my opinion, the most impactful, and I don't even know how to describe it, places, I guess that you could say, that is inside of Herculaneum is the boathouses. Now, we talk a lot on this channel about provenance research, repatriation, and restitution of artifacts and objects, and how sometimes objects or human remains, especially human remains, belong back into their source countries or communities of origin. In museums, I feel a lot of these objects lose the impact that they have or the history that they have coming from these cultures. When you see something behind a glass case, it's just sitting there. It's not really impacting you. You don't see it within the cultural context or historical context of which it came from. In my opinion, that's one of the most important parts of history, objects, artifacts, and archaeology. So when you go to Herculaneum and you go to the boathouses, there are over 300 men, women, children, skeletons that are inside of these houses that were buried exactly where they died when Vesuvius erupted. When Mount Vesuvius erupted during this time, and of course Vesuvius didn't immediately envelop Herculaneum or Pompeii, which of course a lot of people think that is what happened. I honestly thought that's what happened at first until I did more of a deeper dive. This comes back to do your research. Back to the boathouses in Herculaneum, there are over 300 men, women, and children that are inside that were discovered inside of these boathouses. It is now thought that most of Herculaneum actually was able to be evacuated from Herculaneum following the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. They had about 24 hours to escape and evacuate from the first point of the initial eruption all the way up until when it was buried with pyroclastic flows, as well as ash and rock and, of course, lava. Unfortunately, these 300 people were unable to be evacuated, and they all fled and hid inside of the boathouses that were once the shoreline of Herculaneum, as it was on the ocean. The shoreline is now miles from Herculaneum, as that is just how much ash, magma, rock, lava, what have you, was flowing out of the volcano and established this farther away shoreline. Temperatures reached over 500 degrees Celsius or 900 degrees Fahrenheit. All soft tissue immediately melted. Death was pretty much instantaneous, which provides a little bit of solace. Within the historical context of Herculaneum, this means that all of the skeletons that you see, all these 300 women, men, children that were here, they are laying exactly how they died. To me, this is one of the most impactful things that I've ever seen in pretty much all of my time studying museums and archaeological sites. I have never had this much of a reaction to seeing something in a museum or historical site than I did when I was in Herculaneum. I do not have any pictures. I refuse to take any pictures of human remains. That's my own personal opinion. When it comes to either inside of a museum or in an archaeological site like this. But you can look up online if you're interested the history of Herculaneum, and they do have some pictures of the boathouses. Now, adding on to that, there is an aspect which I might do a whole separate video on called dark tourism. Dark tourism has to deal with the niche kind of dark side of tourism, with tourists who visit specifically darker and more morbid sites, whether this is Pompeii, Herculaneum. Sometimes this can also be concentration camps that are in Germany, or for example the 9/11 Museum and Memorial. There have been many debates and articles that have come out about dark tourism. The most popular recently has been people that have been going to either Auschwitz or other cemeteries or mass graves, massacre places, and taking selfies, basically, showing that they have been to these places. In my own personal experience and just how I feel and beliefs of taking pictures of human remains, cemeteries, I do not take pictures of human remains. So this kind of, in my opinion, is a very interesting debate, as you do see a lot of people, mostly influencers or those who are trying to see all these places and they want to prove that they've been to these places. For example, there are a lot of mummies or mummified people that are inside of museums such as the British Museum, the Louvre, and of course the National Archaeological Museum in Naples that I mentioned before. I have seen many people take selfies or pictures of themselves in front of these dead bodies that are within these glass cases or that are out in the open. While I was in Herculaneum, I saw a family taking a family picture in front of the 300 skeletons of people depicted in their last dying breath or their last hour. To me, I wouldn't want to have a family picture in front of these skeletons of those who had passed in a horrific way. So I do think that dark tourism is an interesting debate, and again, I might do a video on it as I have written a paper on it before, but it is kind of a touchy topic and subject due to the sensitive nature of the often historical sites that people go to see. But as I said, seeing these people within the context of Herculaneum was very impactful, and there were just no words to describe it. I mean, I was in tears the whole time that I was seeing this and walking along the boathouses and the boat sheds. You just feel it when you're there. And that's something that you can't really get in a museum oftentimes. And I'm saying this as a museum professional. Sometimes when it's behind a glass case, it's removed from its context, historical, cultural, religious context, and you don't really feel anything. Some people might not. It just depends. This is why we talk about provenance research, decolonization, and restitution and repatriation. So moving away from Herculaneum, but in the same kind of strand or thread, we are going over to Pompeii. Pompeii is a lot larger than Herculaneum, but it is a lot less well preserved. You will not be able to see this in one day. I'm just gonna tell you right now. There are so many places in Pompeii to see. It has a main street. There are just so many buildings. There's a museum that you can go see that's inside of Pompeii. They have an amphitheater that you can go in. Actually, when we were there, it was about 2 days after the recent Pompeii documentary had come out with Tom Hiddleston on Disney+. I highly recommend that you watch that, as it does talk about Pompeii and Herculaneum, and it is probably one of the most interesting documentaries that I have ever seen, and one of the most unique documentaries that I have ever seen. It's really informational, educational, and honestly very impactful, and it kind of brings home the point of the fact that these were real people and their lives just ended after this eruption. So I highly recommend that you go watch that, as it is really interesting, and I watched it right after I had gone to Pompeii and Herculaneum, and it was amazing. But back to Pompeii. It is probably one of the most well-known archaeological sites in the world, I would have to admit or assume. It is really breathtaking, but I will say after a while it does seem a little bit monotonous, as there are a lot of ruins, a lot of houses to see, so you very much have to pace yourself. And again, you're not going to finish it all in one day, so don't even try. The Temple of Apollo, or the Sanctuary of Apollo, is one of my favorite places to see within Pompeii. And as you're walking around, every time you look over, you just see Vesuvius looming over Pompeii, which is crazy. Unfortunately, I was unable to go up to Vesuvius, as you can go all the way up to the top. But I was a little chicken, and we also didn't have time. But I highly recommend that if you ever do have the opportunity to go see Pompeii, that you do. Not only are there ruins of houses, temples, even fast food restaurants, as our tour guide had told us, they also have the plaster casts of the people that they found that had been buried after the eruption of Vesuvius. So the plaster casts are different than the skeletons at Herculaneum. The plaster casts, basically how it worked was that they had little pockets inside the ash that were the skeletons of those who had passed away during the eruption. Well, an archaeologist discovered that they could pour plaster inside of these air pockets, and it would become the form of the person that had died. It's a really interesting process, and they explain it more in detail and more in depth inside the museum with the plaster cast that is in the antiquarium, I believe, that is inside of Pompeii. The plaster casts are, of course, one of the more famous kind of artifacts, although I hate using that word for these human remains, that are within Pompeii. Because of this, I wanted to read out one of the quotes that honestly I thought summed it up very well, that was in front of the plaster casts that were in Pompeii. This is from Luigi Settembrini in 1863. I apologize for my pronunciation. It says, this is translated from Italian. It says, "It is not art, it is not imitation, but it's their bones, the relics of their flesh and their clothes mixed with plaster. It is the pain of death that regains body and form. You, my Forelli, have discovered human pain, and anyone who is human feels it." I think that was the best way to describe it, as, again, these are real people that had perished during this eruption, and it's not art. It's not an archaeological artifact that someone discovered and brushed off, not a coin. It's a person. There are human remains inside of this plaster cast. So to me, that's just really impactful to see. By walking through Pompeii, you're walking in the footsteps of those who were there thousands of years ago. You're walking in the same shops, the same temples, the same sanctuaries that they had, the same houses. You're walking in someone's house. It's almost like they just picked up and left. They abandoned it. They just went out for groceries and then they never came back. You're tasting the same food. The bread that's inside of the archaeological museum is a recipe that was found in Pompeii. You're tasting bread from thousands of years ago. This to me is what makes museums, historical sites, archaeological sites so interesting and just in an odd kind of way, fun, because you get to relive history and notice that the same things that were happening thousands of years ago are also happening today, and the same kind of stores, the same food you can still have today. It's just really interesting and really cool to me that you can see all this when visiting Pompeii and Herculaneum. So of course, I highly recommend that you go visit these two sites as well as the Archaeological Museum, but more importantly that you visit Herculaneum and Pompeii. So that is where I visited across Italy in mostly archaeological sites and museums. Again, I was taking a course, so it was more inside of a classroom, but we also got to go out and see a lot of different museums and historical sites while we were there. Now, of course, I did mention that I would be doing a couple book reviews soon. The first one or second one, I haven't decided yet, as I'm still working my way through it, trying to finish the last few pages, is The Rape of Europa. It is a nonfiction book, and it is quite dense, which is why it is taking me a little bit to get through the final last pages, but I promise I'll finish it soon. In the meantime, I have also been reading All the Beauty in the World, which is actually by a museum guard that worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for, I think it was about 10 years. It's really interesting, and he kind of talks about some of the things that I talked about with Pompeii and Herculaneum, of seeing art and history through people's eyes and seeing human remains, and how he dealt with that and how he observed people looking at these things. So overall, they're both really interesting books, and I, of course, will dive more in depth once I do my book review of them. And I, of course, will also be doing another compilation video of all of my museum overviews, as I am trying to catch up on all of them on my Instagram and YouTube, as I have visited quite a few and I realized I didn't do any overviews for them. So that'll be coming soon as well. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this video in particular got you thinking about the impact that human remains and cultural context, historical context have on museums and archaeological sites. And I hope this also inspires you not to take any selfies in front of human remains, skeletons, anything that is of sensitive nature within a museum or archaeological or historical site. So thank you so much for watching, and be sure to do your research and stay curious, and I will see you next week. Bye!